Hey, students, I hope you're doing well and having a great week. I am going through the drafts and I've already done a lot of you guys, but I'm still working on a few. So thanks for your patience. I hope to have that back to you by tomorrow at the latest. Um, I think maybe the best way I'm seeing a lot of just overarching issues and some consistencies in that. So I think probably the best thing that we can do to make sure that you're all understanding the material is to go through a really strong example. This is from one of my face to face classes, and the student made an A. And so I want to show you some of the components that they did really, really well. And hope that that really helps you guys as you're finishing up your own essay. So, first of all, I want you to see this really great formatting. We see here at the right that there's a name, and particularly the last name and a page number. And then here on the left, we see their name, my name, the class, and the date that the assignment is due. And then we have this title that reflects the content of the essay, not the assignment, not profile essay, but it's really the content that we see here. So let's talk about the introduction. We see that everything is left aligned with this margin, and we see this really clear indentation right here as well. And one of the things that I'm really seeing that a lot of you are neglecting is this idea of detail and really developing sensory language. A lot of you, there's no sense of setting, there's no sense of what the people you're profiling have said. You don't have any direct quotes that really support those ideas. I mean, that's a really important component to the profile essay. If we're just writing example essays and all we're doing is sharing what we think or what we know about the person, it's not really a profile. A profile has direct quotes and it has this substance to it that really helps us know the person from the writer's perspective, but also from the perspective of what that person is saying and conveying. So, this particular student right here, she starts out by saying, "The smell of burnt lemongrass and Thai basil welcomes me as I open the door of a modest single family home. At the door, I take off my shoes as I hear a cluttering in the kitchen." Now, what I want you to note here is this is a really great hook. Okay. The student's writing from this perspective of interviewing her subject, and this hook really grabs our attention and it takes us to the place that the writer is at. She said, "My attention is drawn to the calm, familiar voice. Student, have you eaten yet?" And I exchanged that word student for the student's name for her privacy. "Come get a plate." Although she arrived in the United States under the name of Laura, my grandmother's given name is That Vu. To me, however, she was always known as Banoi, or the first syllable of the term. The term translates to grandma in English. I turn the corner and I'm greeted with a wide, gap toothed smile and kind eyes connected by deep wrinkles. I would not know it until after the interview, but these wrinkles would be a result of her past life and the trials she confronted. Hi, Khan, Ba says. Ka refers to the children in a family dynamic. She wraps her arms around me with the ends of her salt and pepper hair tickling my shoulders. I kiss her on the cheek and she smiles as she returns to the cooking. I ask if she's ready for the interview. She's still smiling as she answers warmly and points down to a pan on the stove. "I'll be ready when you finish a plate of food." I was aware that life could be difficult in Vietnam, especially after the war, but nothing could have prepared me for the actual reality many had suffered through. My grandma faced unrelenting hardships, but her resilience enabled her to endure challenges such as the ruthless regime in Vietnam and the abuse of her marriage, which eventually would help her achieve a life of contentment. Now, guys, what I want you to see here, we have this really beautiful picture of what setting she's in. That's very evident to us. And we see these direct quotes and we really see the dynamic of the relationship between the two people. Um, this is not expected. You don't have to do this, but a lot of you are really neglecting the background information. You're using these 3 sentence introductions and you're neglecting that meat that really draws the reader in and makes them want to get to that thesis statement. And then some of you are giving so many examples in the introduction that the thesis really gets lost. And those examples should really be saved for your body paragraph. So let's take a look at this thesis right here. It said, my grandma faced unrelenting hardships, but her resilience enabled her to endure challenges such as the ruthless regime in Vietnam and the abuse in her marriage, which eventually would lead to a life of contentment. It's very clear what we're going to understand and what we're going to read in this essay based off of this very clear thesis statement. And what I want you to note is this is only one sentence. This didn't take 5 sentences. She didn't get into the details of what this looked like or what this meant in her life. So then I'm going to go over one body paragraph to help you guys understand really how to write a strong topic sentence. So here we see that the author says, and I'm going to highlight this, it is simple to skim over headlines about third world countries suffering the horrors of living under an authoritarian rule, but the reality is usually far more severe for the ones experiencing it or have faced it. I get ready to ask the first question as I finish my meal. There was communism when you were back in Vietnam. How did that affect your life? So while it's implied, right? It's implied and she doesn't give this super concrete, this is what happened. What we can tell is that her grandmother suffered and survived this really, really hard reality. And she posed it in a way where she's asking the question herself. There was communism when you were back in Vietnam. How did that affect your life? She looks up at the ceiling and mumbles while thinking of her answer, a habit we both share. Guys, this is so great because we can actually see the person who's being profiled. We can see their movements, we can see their facial expressions, we can see what they're doing, and that gives us a really strong sense of what that person's feeling and thinking as they're going through these ideas. It still exists there today, but you weren't allowed to oppose them, and you had to say and act like you favored them. It was terrible, she exclaims. I translate her words onto my notepad as she continues. And if you didn't obey, they would make sure you stayed at a lower status. They would keep you back in certain grades at school and would make up a reason to prevent you from getting a driver's license. Simply, they would do anything to make sure you didn't progress in life. I make a sound of understanding as she continues. There were nights I couldn't eat because we had to ration constantly. I hated it. I questioned her if she worked during this time. Ba nods. Yes, I did, but it had to be in secret because the government didn't allow mass gatherings. Was it to keep people from unionizing or to keep anti-communist thoughts repressed? I asked. The bridge of her nose crinkles to convey her resentment as memories of inhuman treatment come to mind. It was exactly that. They didn't want a mass of intelligence to form. Thoughts of rebellion would have spread rapidly. Her hands fly outward from her center as she emphasizes rapidly. I press on the subject more. And if you were caught working, what would happen? Her hands are back in her lap now, and she looks unsettled. The police would gather everyone they had detained, including you, and you'd be put in prison. They would almost always beat you there. She's in there, she tells me. Time spent in prison was common for an average person living in Vietnam at this time. Despite the horrors of living under a government that blatantly disrespected the rights of its civilians, my grandma prevailed. What I want you to notice is she doesn't end with an explanation. She comes back to this topic. And when we look at her thesis statement right here, my grandma faced unrelenting hardships, but her resilience enabled her to endure. What we see is that that summative sentence goes right back to that original thesis. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to highlight just the topic in summative sentences. We saw in the thesis statement that she talked about her difficult marriage, and we see that right here, abuse in her marriage. And again, we go right back to that idea in the second body paragraph. And then if we go down to the summative sentence, ultimately she would overcome this obstacle and triumph over her abusers. And then I'm going to point your attention to the summative sentence in the final body paragraph. Whether it was laboring in less ideal circumstances or facing the uncertainty of a foreign country, my grandma continued to persevere for a prosperous life through the love she shares for her family and close friends. Guys, this is really where your essay is really formed, those topic and summative sentences that go back to that thesis statement that indicate why you want to be like this person. Description matters, okay? Even if you don't input yourself into the story like this writer did, that's not expected. There should be very clear description of that person. I should be able to see them. I should be able to hear them. I should be able to get a sense of who they are based on this profile essay. That's really what a profile is all about. And if you think about profiles that maybe you've read and you didn't even realize that that's what they were, oftentimes it can be in tabloid magazines or maybe a blog or something online that you've read. You feel that's why people get so attached to celebrities. They feel like they know them. And that should be the goal here. I shouldn't just know what your dad did or what your friend did or what your grandma did. I should get a strong sense of who they are. I should be able to see them and hear them and really get a strong perspective of who they are, not just from you, but from their perspective as well, through the things that they say and the words that they convey. So I just want you to ask yourself, am I thinking of all the sensory language? Am I thinking about what I'm visualizing when I'm asking these questions? And if you haven't interviewed this person, if you are simply writing this essay without an interview, without asking them some of the hard stuff, you're going to really miss out on the meat and bones of what a profile essay is. Because no matter how well you know someone, anytime you ask them questions, you're going to learn things and you're going to understand things in a deeper and more meaningful way. And as you can see here, that really helps convey the examples that she's trying to share in light of the topics that she's using. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about this particular example or any of the concepts that I said today, please don't hesitate to reach out.